Happy Monday, sports fans. Happy NFL playoffs, football fans. The regular season is over. It is wild card week. Welcome into the show. This is Behind the Lines for wild card week. My name is Stephen Andress, managing editor at thelines.com, joined each and every Monday by Christian Cipollini, sports trader at BetMGM. And Christian, we have some fantastic, interesting, entertaining topics to talk about today. We're going to take a look back at Week 18, wrap things up, the biggest public wins, the biggest public losses. We are now going to also look at where Super Bowl futures stand and the top two teams in terms of liability at BetMGM. And then we'll wrap up with opening odds for Wild Card Weekend. But first, Christian, we have to talk about Sunday Night Football because that, for me, was one of the three best NFL games I have ever seen, not only because of the way the game played out, but everything surrounding it with playoff situations, the potential for a tie actually happened at the end. Both teams would have made the playoffs if a tie happened. And more notable for you guys at BetMGM, you guys had some liability if a tie came in. So give us some insight here on what you guys were looking at if the Raiders did not kick that field goal as time expired, or if they would have missed it and it would have wound up being a tie.
Yeah, tie was an absolute nightmare scenario. We had people betting tie all over the place. Just straight bets alone, we were in multi-million liability on just the tie. That's not even including parlays, which would have been skyrocketed numbers. We had a lot of people who were parlaying the Jags money line with the tie because of that kind of correlated outcome. So that would have been a nightmare scenario, and the real nightmare scenario would have been if they just kneeled down the whole game. We had a lot of people making one-game parlays with that scenario happening, and it would have been an absolute disaster. So that game actually ended up being one of the better ones for the book on that outcome. We needed the Raiders there, but yeah, the book was sweating a tie. Is the best I can put it.
So obviously, if you listen to the coaches going into the week, we were never going to have like a kneel fest for the entire 60 minutes, right? It just so happened that naturally it played out at the end where we had a potential tie situation. But so regardless of those one-game parlays where they were betting on a kneel fest, I think the odds on Jags money line and a tie, correct me if I'm wrong, were like 35-1, 41, somewhere in that range, right?
Yeah, depending on when you got it, it would have been around that range. Earlier in the week, our normal tie scenario is usually like around like 60-1, 80-1, somewhere around there. And then it ended up dropping down because we just kept taking bets and realizing the scenario that kind of there is an incentive to tie there for both teams. They do have a reason to want to tie if it does get to that point.
I think I misspoke. I said 35 or 40-1. I meant like 350 or 400-1, right?
Yeah, it was massive. Yeah, you could place like a $5 bet to win a couple thousand.
Wow,
on that parlay.
Incredible. All right, so let's look back at Week 18. Outside of Sunday Night Football and that amazing, wild situation, what were a couple of the biggest public wins in Week 18?
So the Jaguars, of course, was one of the big ones. No one really gave them any credit. Now, no one really thought the Colts would lose there. They had everything to play for. The Jags had nothing to play for.
Oh, so this is one of the biggest wins for BetMGM then?
Yes.
Okay,
sorry.
Yeah.
One of the big BetMGM wins was the Jags. There, the Lions were another big one, and the Broncos on Saturday night were our three biggest book wins.
Okay, so you had some money on the Chiefs and the Packers and the Colts, obviously. So public went down overall on that front. How about on the flip side there? What were some of the sides that the public handicapped correctly?
The Cowboys was one of our biggest loss on Saturday as well. That was another weird game where kind of unsure which team would play starters, and then kind of at the last minute the Eagles had announced that they weren't going to start anyone. So yeah, we took a pretty big hit there, and then also the 49ers game was a big loser a big winner for the public. Kind of a similar situation. 49ers backs against the wall, so everyone decided to take them there.
That one's kind of interesting to me because obviously fans understood the situation with the Niners and them needing to win, but they're playing a strong team in the Rams. They were underdogs in that game. I'm sure you don't have the numbers right off the top of your head here, but if you had to guess, like how often are underdogs in a game turning out to be big public winners this year, like the 49ers were? They were like 3.5, 4-point underdogs in that game.
Yeah, usually not too often, but it kind of falls in line. Like when it hits that like kind of number where it was sitting, people are mostly just taking 49ers money line. So it's a good payout for there as opposed to. So what the book needed there was Rams to win but not cover. That would have been the ideal scenario. But 49ers winning outright is where they get those big money line payouts.
And lastly, before we move on to Super Bowl futures here, overall, winning week for the book, losing week for the book, winning week for the public, losing week for the public. How do we wrap up Week 18 here, the first in NFL history?
That field goal saved the week for the book. So it was a winning week for the book. It would have been one of the worst weeks had they not kicked that field goal.
So Daniel Carlson, the new favorite player in the entire NFL for BetMGM to wrap up the 2021 regular season. I love it. All right, let's look at Super Bowl futures here as we begin the NFL postseason. I'm going to run through these here, and then, Christian, I'm going to ask you which two teams have the biggest liability for you guys if they go on a run here and wind up winning the Super Bowl. So the favorites, the Green Bay Packers at 4-1, followed closely by the Chiefs at 5-1, the Bills at 7-1, the Titans, the 1 seed in the AFC, the fourth choice at plus 750 with the advantage of not having to play this weekend. The defending champs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, Christian, you told me all year they were one of your top liabilities for a lot of this season, at least in the early going, because you guys piled on money right after they won the Super Bowl in February, and some offseason money came in on the Bucs. They have now dropped down a little bit. They are the fifth choice at plus 850. The Rams 10-1, Cowboys 12-1, Cardinals 18-1. The Bengals 20-1, which is an interesting one for me personally. The Patriots 20-1, the 49ers 20-1, the Raiders 50-1, the Steelers 66-1, as well as the Eagles at 66-1. So let's start with the second biggest liability for you guys, Christian, in Super Bowl futures at this point. In other words, which team is going to cost you the second most money if they wind up losing the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl?
Yeah, right now it's the Titans with that first-round bye and Derrick Henry coming back. So that is a little worrisome for the book as their second biggest liability. You know, they get that bye and Derrick Henry coming back. It's pretty big for them. And the AFC is pretty open, too.
And those odds have dropped a little bit. I think, I was looking at an AFC futures. They were 5-1 last week. If I'm not mistaken, they were probably 30-1 at some point this season, if you remember off the top of your head, Christian?
I don't remember if they got that high, but yeah, last week I think they were around 15-1, 16-1, something like that. So, and probably 2 or 3 weeks before that, they might have been around 18 or 19-1, 20-1.
Yeah, for sure. When they were going through that stretch with all the injuries and then losing to the Texans, those odds definitely dipped. And they've rallied back here. And, yours truly sitting on a Mike Vrabel Coach of the Year ticket, hoping that one comes in, because what he did with having to play more players in a season than any coach in NFL history, I think was absolutely remarkable. How about the biggest liability in Super Bowl futures at BetMGM as we enter the NFL postseason?
Yeah, for us, it's the Arizona Cardinals. I think we've kind of touched on that before. They opened up at I think about 40-1 or 50-1 to start the season, and when they started hot, with our Arizona presence as well, we just kept taking bets and bets and bets. So we're hoping they don't go far.
If I had to guess, pretty high correlation there with the opening of legal online sports betting in the state of Arizona right before the start of the NFL season, right?
Yeah, exactly. We launched in Arizona, I think, the day before Week 1 or the day of Week 1, something like that. So yeah, they piled it on right there.
So those odds have gone from there all the way down now to 18-1. They did not win the division like it looked like they were going to do for most of the season, so they're going to have to go on the road here 3 consecutive weeks to get to the Super Bowl. So we'll see. That liability could be washed out after this week against the Rams. We'll see.
Yeah, I will add, too, we just a few minutes ago while we're taping this, we did just take a $50,000 bet to win $1 million on the Bengals. So they're going to jump up a little bit in liability as well with that.
There you go. Have those odds shifted from what you're seeing on your screen? We quoted them here on the pod just a minute ago at 20-1.
Yeah, that bet came in at 20-1. So yeah, they're still sitting there.
I like Joe Burrow, man. I think they're dangerous. If Zach Taylor finally takes the training wheels off and just lets Joe Burrow cook here, I think they're very difficult to stop. So I don't think they're going to have any trouble with the Raiders this week. Whether they cover or not is a different story. I think they get through the game, though. So we'll see how that plays out. Before we wrap up, of course, each and every Monday we look at the opening odds for the upcoming week in the NFL. It is Wild Card Weekend. We have the first ever Monday Night Football game on Wild Card Weekend. We also have 2 games on Saturday. In total, it is a 6-game Wild Card slate, 12 teams in action. Christian, let's start with the Saturday games, beginning with the first matchup, the Raiders at the Bengals, 4:30 Eastern time on Saturday.
Yeah, Bengals open up as 6.5-point favorites at home there. That total is 49.5.
And then the nightcap in Buffalo, early forecast looking at potentially some snow. Patriots at the Bills. What are we looking at?
Bills 4.5, total 43.5, so a low total there for their third matchup of the season.
I guarantee you there are some people with big wallets and deep pockets who are looking at that Buffalo forecast very carefully. If there's snow and wind in that game after what we saw in the first matchup between these two teams, where the Patriots threw 3 passes and were not only able to cover, but won that game, and now the spread is even bigger right now as we record on Monday at 4.5. All right, the Sunday slate, we have 3 games at 1 o'clock, 4:30, and 8:15. Let's start with the early one, Philadelphia at the defending champs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, Bucks open at 8.5-point favorites there, and that totals 49.5.
This is a game I want to dig into for the rest of this week. I also want to make sure Jalen Hurts' ankle is okay. I think that was probably just a Week 18 excuse to get him off the field. But with the Bucks being depleted now, down Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown obviously gone, Mike Evans got a little banged up in that Week 18 game. Gronk is never going to be completely healthy with the number of hits he takes throughout the course of a calendar year. I'm curious about this spread. I got to dig in a little more. It depends on whether I think the Eagles are actually going to be able to pass the ball against this Bucs team with how run heavy they have been and how good the Bucs defense is at stopping the run. But I haven't made a decision yet, but right now, if I had to lean, I'd say that was maybe too many points. I'd maybe take the Eagles in that one. Next game, the middle game on Sunday, San Francisco at Dallas, Christian.
Dallas 3-point favorites. The total is 50.5.
Has that number come down a little bit from what you expected? I think we were looking at maybe like 3.5 or 4. But I think maybe some early San Francisco money on that one.
Yeah, we did open at 3.5 for the Cowboys, and we're down to 3 now.
All right, so some early money on San Francisco in that matchup. That to me is maybe the game of the weekend here. I think those are 2 teams that could go on a run here in the NFC, and one of them is going to be gone by Sunday evening. Pittsburgh at Kansas City. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by this spread one on Christian.
No, it opened at 13.5. We are down to 12.5 now, but the total's 46.5. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of Chiefs money.
Yeah, you already got some of my money because that's my early week bet for Wild Card Weekend. I did bet the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not one to put a ton on a game that they played earlier this year. It's, I guess, a little notable that the Chiefs beat them 36-10 earlier this year. But just from a scheme and from a statistical standpoint and what each team brings to the table, the Pittsburgh Steelers have gone like 6 of the past 7 games and scoring like 3 or 0 points in the first half. They cannot move the ball. And a lot of the points in the scoring that they've had over that stretch has been garbage time. So now they have to face the Kansas City Chiefs. Anything south of 2 touchdowns, I'm good with. Like, I've already bet them to cover this spread. I'm going to bet them probably to cover the first quarter spread. I'm going to bet them to probably cover the first half spread. So I don't know. Just for me personally, Christian, I think this number is going to be on the move. We'll see. But I don't know if there's a number that you're going to have a hard time, I think, finding a number that's going to attract some Steelers bets other than casual fans who root for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine we're just going to take Chiefs money the whole day. I think we're going to take a lot of Chiefs first half and a lot of Chiefs first quarter as well. Because, yeah, like you said, if the Steelers start out like that, it's going to be over quick.
I just think it's so obvious that Ben can't throw the ball deep anymore, and their offensive line is a mess, and the Chiefs' defensive front has been strong enough. I think they're going to wreck that offensive line for the Steelers, and Ben's going to be a sitting duck back there. And it's a shame. It's going to be a rough way to end his career, I think, if it plays out the way I think it will. But, hey, it's the NFL. Them's the breaks. Final game on the slate, the first Monday Night Football wildcard game in NFL history, and we could talk next week about potential rest disadvantage for the winner of this game for divisional week. But Arizona Cardinals at the Los Angeles Rams. What are we looking at for an opener there?
Rams 4.5-point favorites currently, and that total is tied for our second biggest of the weekend at 50.5.
All right, those two split the regular season series. Both haven't exactly been firing on all cylinders entering the playoffs here, so it'll be curious to see where the money comes in on that one, whether they believe in the Rams' talent on paper or whether they believe that the Cardinals will get back to what they were. And curious if J.J. Watt comes back for this game, too. He's been blowing up Twitter here a little bit, looking like he might come back from an injury that the Cardinals didn't think he was going to be able to. So interesting development on that front in this game as well. Christian, as always, thank you so much for joining us and giving us fantastic insight from the book's perspective. On Tuesday, Matt Brown will be back looking at early line movement for NFL Wildcard Week. And then on Thursday, Matt Brown, Brad Allen, and myself will look at the entire Wildcard Weekend slate. Not many games to go through this week, so we'll dive in a little bit deeper and let you know what bets we have locked in. My early Wildcard Weekend bet is the Chiefs to cover that 12.5 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it is just an enormous mismatch for Kansas City. But for Christian Cipollini, I'm Stephen Andress. Good luck on Wild Card Weekend.